So it's a bonus episode, if you consider getting an episode you'd normally expect just at a different time. This should have gone out a week ago. Well, I should have put out a news episode a week ago, but you can understand why I didn't.
You don't have to be poor anymore. Jesus is here.
The loudspeaker spoke up and said, Christianity is stupid.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude, not far from the Redneck Mecca. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznutz is curled up on the couch. He's mad at me because I gave him his flea medicine. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and his cat. Get over it. This is a news show episode where I cover stories in the news that are related to things like atheism, secularism, science, or I find just plain interesting. Next episode will be a chapter or two from the Apocrypha. Now, as I mentioned in the last episode, my sleep schedule is all out of whack. Today is Sunday, and I wasn't able to get any sleep, so I had a decision to make. I could go into work and do a physically demanding job for 12 hours, hoping that I wouldn't keel over from a heart attack, or I could once again call in sick and force myself to stay up as late as I can to try and get myself back on my sleep schedule. As you can tell, I opted to call out, and to ensure that I stay awake for as long as possible, I decided to do a news episode. Let me just apologize in advance for no doubt how loopy I'll be near the ending of this recording. The only other bit of news I have isn't terribly happy for me. I'm fairly certain that Duracell, one of my outdoor cats, has died. He seemed to be having health problems after I had him neutered and was in rough shape the last time I saw him about a week or so ago. He was rail thin and his fur was filthy. I would have liked to have gotten him to the vet to be checked out since he was the cat I've had the longest, but I wasn't able to catch him the times I've had enough money to get him seen. Still, for a semi-feral cat, he had a good long life. They only average about 2 years if they're feral, and he made it 5 times that. His mother died on my birthday back in 2012. She was 7, so he outlived her, both in terms of years and the date. You can tell I'm fading. Leela, the other outdoor cat I claim as mine, is his daughter, I suspect. She seems to be doing perfectly fine. Okay, let's get to the news before I nod off here.
Now you listen here. He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. Now go away.
Okay, so the story about the Catholic Church in Pennsylvania is old news now. And as I record this, Pope Frankie is just back in Rome after his visit to Ireland, where he'd been met by protests. But something that I haven't heard anyone mention so far is that the Pennsylvania scandal is the third major scandal in the U.S. in just the past 20 years. Hard to believe it's been almost that long. The Milwaukee Archdiocese and the Boston Archdiocese are the two others. Both of those date from around 2003 or so. The total number of known victims for those 3 archdioceses is over 1,000 and probably many more. Were I a state's attorney general, you can bet that these stories would have me looking at the churches in my jurisdiction to see what they had been up to. And at least one state's attorney general's office is investigating the church in their area. From NPR.org. St. Louis Archdiocese agrees to Attorney General's investigation of sexual abuse allegations. And Fuzznutz is now coming over to say hi. The St. Louis Archdiocese is handing over its records to the State Attorney General's office for an investigation into the Missouri Church's handling of sexual abuse accusations against clergy members. Archbishop Robert Carlson made the announcement that he was voluntarily opening church files at a press conference on Thursday. Carlson said he made the invitation to Attorney General Josh Hawley in a letter, adding that he was prompted by several letters he had received urging greater transparency. Second, he said, we have nothing to hide. And if you believe that. The move by Carlson follows the recent release of a Pennsylvania grand jury report detailing decades of alleged sexual abuse by more than 300 priests and cover-ups by high-ranking clergy leaders. Carlson said Hawley will have unfettered access to the Archdiocese's comprehensive files. Among the records are files regarding more than 24 priests who have been removed from the church. Sandra Price, executive director of the Office of Child and Youth Protection for the Archdiocese. Man, talk about the Fox Guard and the motherfucking henhouse, huh? Told reporters at the press conference. She confirmed 27 living priests have been removed from priestly ministry within the Archdiocese. Notice no mention of them being turned over to the authorities. She did not specify a time frame for the removals. Price added that there are no priests serving in priestly ministry with substantiated or credible allegations of abuse at this time. And we all know the Catholic Church is so good at accepting victim statements, right? I am dubious that the church will be turning over everything that they have. From the Pennsylvania case, we've learned that the church has come up with a number of methods to make it appear that they're cooperating with the authorities while still protecting abusers. If you recall, the expert that the Spotlight team from the Boston Globe consulted with said that roughly 6% of priests abuse children. In Pennsylvania, that number was as high as 10%. According to Wikipedia, there are presently 337 priests in the Archdiocese of St. Louis, so roughly 30 priests are likely to be abusers, which fits in with the number of living priests said to have been accused. Of course, they claim that they've gotten rid of any priests who've been accused. We'll just have to see. And again, they haven't turned them over to the authorities. On a related note, we have this from the WashingtonPost.com. Former Vatican ambassador says Pope Francis and Pope Benedict knew of sexual misconduct allegations against McGarrick for years. A former Vatican ambassador to the United States has alleged in an 11-page letter that Pope Benedict XVI and Pope Francis, among other top Catholic Church officials, had been aware of sexual misconduct allegations against former D.C. Archbishop Cardinal Theodore McCarrick years before he resigned this summer. The letter from Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, who was recalled from his D.C. post in 2016 amid allegations that he'd become embroiled in the conservative American fight against same-sex marriage, was first reported by the National Catholic Register and LifeSite News, two conservative Catholic sites. The accusation sent a shockwave across the reeling Roman Catholic Church, but the letter offered no proof of its claims, and Vigano on Sunday told the Washington Post that he wouldn't comment further beyond confirming that he was the letter's author. Silence and prayer are the only things that are benefiting, he said. I can only assume he's choosing to remain silent now because he doesn't want the Vatican to strip away his pension. When reporters asked Pope Frankie about the letter, he refused to discuss it. The Pope has said on Twitter that he's asked the Virgin Mary to heal the victims of the abuse. I'll throw in a request to the Tooth Fairy as well to do something about this. And staying with the Catholic Church and sex scandals, we have this from the BBC. Nuns arrested over Smilham child abuse case claims. 12 people, some of them nuns, have been arrested over claims of abuse at a former children's home in Lanarkshire. Police said 11 women and 1 man, all aged between 62 and 85, had been charged in connection with the abuse of children at Smilham Park. The home, which closed in 1981, was run by a Catholic order known as Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. Police said a further 4 people were due to be reported to the Crown Office in connection with their investigation. Smilham Park took in more than 11,000 children over the course of its existence from 1864 to 1981. It has been hit with claims of sexual and physical abuse and is being investigated as part of the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry. If you will recall, there were a whole host of homes like this in Ireland, which were pretty much slave labor operations as well as baby murdering factories. The stories of those places hitting the media in recent years is what soured so many people in Ireland ahead of the Pope's visit. This is certainly the first case of its kind that I've heard of in Scotland, but it's certainly not going to be the only one. Gotta wonder what the impact of this is going to be in Scotland. Now, let's move over to the Protestant side of things. From Pathos.com, 97-year-old televangelist sued for sexual abuse, harassment, and coerced vasectomy. Pastor Ernest Angley, the 97-year-old head of Grace Cathedral Church in Akron, Ohio, is being sued for allegedly abusing one of his associate pastors for years. It's only the latest allegation of abuse in a career full of them. Longtime listeners will recall that I mentioned this ass gasket back in episode 44. One of the victims in the story that I covered is now suing Angley. Basically, when the kid was like 18, Angley told him to marry a woman from the church who was a bit younger than this guy was. And Angley insisted that before they got married, dude had to get a vasectomy. Because it's the end times, and we can't be bringing no more babies in this world. So, dude got the vasectomy, and then Angley said, well, I need to check you out, make sure you're healing right. And so he had the guy strip naked, get a hard on, and jack off in front of him. And Angley's like, yeah, you look like you're doing pretty good. And this happened on numerous occasions, apparently. But if you look at nothing else in the show notes for this week, which I'll put up at some point here, I'm just going to get this thing recorded, go to bed, and then when I get up, I'll edit it. And if I have time, I'll post the show notes. If not, then it'll probably be later on this week, because I'm sure I'm going to be working 12 hours every day. But anyways, if you look at nothing else, check out the pictures of Angley. He looks like a melted Ken doll. The guy's obviously bald, but he's wearing a very plastic-looking brown hairpiece. There's no way a 97-year-old man is going to have hair that dark and that thick. And it just looks so fucking weird.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Asps. Very dangerous. You go first.
From LiveScience.com. Neanderthals and Denisovians mated, new hybrid bone reveals. The closest known extinct relatives of modern humans were the thick-browed Neanderthals and the mysterious Denisovans. Now a bone fragment from a Siberian cave, perhaps from a teenage girl, has revealed the first known hybrid of these groups, a new study concludes. The finding confirms interbreeding that had only been hinted at in earlier genetic studies. A number of now extinct human lineages not only lived alongside modern humans, but even interbred with them, leaving traces of their DNA in the modern human genome. These lineages included the stocky Neanderthals as well as the enigmatic Denisovans, known only from a few teeth and bones unearthed in Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains. Archaeological excavations have revealed that Neanderthals and Denisovians coexisted in Eurasia, with Neanderthal bones ranging from 200,000 to 40,000 years ago, unearthed in mostly Western Eurasia, and Denisovans so far only known from fossils ranging from 200,000 to 30,000 years old, found in Eastern Eurasia. Prior work unearthed Neanderthal remains in Denisova Cave, raising questions on how closely they interacted. Well, we now know that they like to get their freak on with one another. Not mentioned in the article is how likely sex between the two species would result in children. I know that scientists say that viable births as a result of our ancestors and Neanderthals having sex would have been extremely rare. It's possible that the same could have been true of Neanderthals and Denisovans, or it's possible that they were related enough that such encounters would have been more likely to yield children. Just don't know. Also from LiveScience.com, blue-eyed immigrants transformed ancient Israel 6,500 years ago. Thousands of years ago, in what is now northern Israel, waves of migrating people from the north and east, present-day Iran and Turkey, arrived in the region, and this influx of newcomers had a profound effect transforming the emerging culture. What's more, these immigrants not only brought new cultural practices, they also introduced new genes, such as the mutation that produces blue eyes, that were previously unknown in that geographic area, according to a new study. Archaeologists recently discovered this historic population shift by analyzing DNA from skeletons preserved in an Israeli cave. The site in the north of the tiny country contains dozens of burials and more than 600 bodies dating to approximately 6,500 years ago, the scientists reported. The article goes on to say that there's a good chance that these people would also have been light-skinned. I know that recent research has shown that the first people to settle in the UK had blue eyes, but they also had very dark skin. This would have been roughly 300,000 years ago. The mutation for light skin didn't appear until about 8,000 years ago, roughly the same time and in the same people who had a mutation which allowed them to consume dairy products as adults. No word on what their hair color would have been like. Whomever these people were, they traveled around on foot or by boat, as horses weren't domesticated until 6,000 years ago. Current science says that our first light-skinned ancestors showed up in the northern parts of Europe. So in roughly 500 years, they managed to travel thousands of miles and grow in numbers such that they were the dominant population in both Europe and parts of the Mideast. Pretty remarkable, I think. From the Latin American Herald Tribune, robots reveal possible 3,000-year-old human sacrifices in Peru. The use of high technology in the form of small all-terrain robots has made it possible to shed light on possible human sacrifices as much as 3,000 years old in the temple of Chavan de Huantar in Peru, the first major religious and pilgrimage center in South American history, at least that we know of. The Chavan rovers, as the robots are called by the team of archaeologists that put them to work in one of Peru's most ancient ruins, edged through the narrow channels that led to the galleries of the complex, many of which remain hidden to this day, and came upon the most important discovery on this site in the last 50 years. These robotic four-wheel drive vehicles, guided by remote control and equipped with cameras and lighting systems, played a leading role in the first discovery of burials from the Chavan period, graves of the same men who built the temple and which are still intact after thousands of years. What's interesting is that they weren't people of high social standing. They were probably sacrificed, but we'll find that out with further studies. U.S. archaeologist John Rick, director for almost 25 years of the excavations financed by Peru's Culture Ministry, Stanford University in the United States, and the Antamina Mining Company. The U.S. archaeologist was intrigued by the position of the bodies buried face down under piles of rocks, which he considered not very honorable treatment for the departed. I know that in some cultures it was customary to bury a human sacrifice, or two or more, under a great temple or other important building, so perhaps these folks were offerings made to the gods of the Chauvin people. Or it's also possible that the Chauvin culture was similar to other cultures where the people buried their dead under the buildings in which they lived in so that they could always be close to their ancestors.
Maybe it's a little early. Maybe the time is not quite yet. But those other worlds, promising untold opportunities, beckon. Silently, they orbit the sun, waiting.
From ScienceAlert.com. It's starting to look like one of our favorite Mars rovers really is dead. A global dust storm on Mars is threatening the future of NASA's Opportunity rover, the longest-lived robot on that planet. The golf cart-sized vehicle launched toward Mars in June 2003, landed in January 2004, and was supposed to last 3 months. Today, the rover is 15 years old and has rolled more than a marathon's worth of miles across the surface of the red planet using solar power. But Opportunity now seems to be in trouble. Thanks to the long-lasting global dust storm, which has now raged for nearly 2 months, Opportunity fell asleep on June 10th and hasn't phoned home. Global dust storms appear once every couple of years and shroud the planet in a dull red haze, but NASA said this is one of the most intense ever recorded. Okay, I have an issue with part of the story, and it's the same one I have whenever there's a story about either Spirit or Opportunity. That's the 3-month lifespan. This simply isn't true. That number comes from how long NASA thought it would be before the rover's solar panels got too covered with dust to be able to generate panel. The rovers themselves were designed to last for years, which they've done. Spirit's been dead for about 8 years now. It's thought because it got stuck in the wrong position for its panels to get enough light to keep it warm during the Martian winter. It is possible that Opportunity will survive the storm, but we won't know until the storm breaks, and who knows when that will be. For those of you familiar with the book or the movie The Martian, I just want to point out that the storm in that was simply a plot device to start the story going. Actual dust storms on Mars are nowhere near as strong and couldn't do what happened in the film, so there's no danger that Opportunity got flipped over or anything. What determines if Opportunity comes back to life is how cold it gets during the storm, how long it stays cold, and how dirty the panels are. NASA kept listening for Spirit to phone home for a year before declaring the rover officially dead. Presumably, they'll do the same thing for Opportunity. All we can do is wait. I certainly hope it comes back to life.
That was the most offensive science report I've ever heard. How could you do such a thing?
Beavis helped me.
From ScienceAlert.com. Physicists say they've come up with a mathematical model for a viable time machine. Physicists have come up with what they claim is a mathematical model of a theoretical time machine, a box that can move backwards and forwards through time and space. The trick, they say, is to use the curvature of space-time in the universe to bend time into a circle for the hypothetical passenger sitting in the box. And that circle allows them to skip into the future and the past. People think of time travel as something as fiction. And we tend to think it's not possible because we don't actually do it, said theoretical physicist mathematician Ben Tippett from the University of British Columbia in Canada, but mathematically it is possible. Essentially, their idea boils down to having a warp field, like in Star Trek, and using this to travel faster than light. By doing so, you'd be able to go back in time. However, to do this, we'd need exotic materials and energy sources that have yet to be invented. So don't get excited about being able to go back in time and kill Hitler just yet. And I want to point out, because it's not discussed in the article, other things I've read about the possibility of time travel say that the time machine, the farthest in the past the time machine can go is to the moment in which the machine was invented. So, and I don't know the logic behind that or the math, and I can't guess if it applies in this case or not. So it may be that, oh, well, you know, we can build it, you know, once we get the technology. Let's say in the year 2200, we have the technology to do it. And it takes us, you know, 5 years to build the thing. Well, you know, they can only go back to the moment the machine was built. They can't go any farther back. That's at least according to some theory. This kind of makes it sound like they could go back any time. I don't know. The other thing I want to point out is that the the warp drive system they talk about in the article, which may or may not work, we won't know until we build one, would require a hell of a lot of energy. I mean, granted, the optimistic, you know, they've revised it to a more optimistic than what they originally had it. Because originally it was like, oh, well, it'll use something like the entire output of the sun to be able to work. And then they've revised it, and they said, no, actually, we only need to convert the mass of Jupiter to energy for this thing to work. So I don't think we'll be seeing that anytime soon.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Democracy simply doesn't work.
As you all know by now, Senator John McCain has died. What you may not know, and which is just one of those weird coincidences, is that he died exactly 9 years to the day and from the same kind of cancer as Senator Ted Kennedy. There has been a considerable amount of discussion of McCain's legacy in the wake of his passing, with many people pointing out that McCain voted against things like Martin Luther King Day, was very pro-war, and opposed to LGBTQ rights. He also, however, did some honorable things. When he was a prisoner during the Vietnam War, he refused the opportunity to be released before his fellow prisoners were. His wife also adopted a girl from one of Mother Teresa's orphanages, who almost certainly would have died had she remained there. And he cast the deciding vote which saved Obamacare. McCain looks so good to many people right now because Trump is such an awful human being. However, had Hillary been elected president instead of Trump, you still would be hearing the same kind of praises about McCain that you're hearing now. This is because we tend not to speak ill of deceased political figures, at least our political figures. Even Nixon got praise when he died. Surprisingly, the vitriol from the Republicans has been so bad that Fox News has had to disable comments on their YouTube's videos talking about McCain's death. From Inquisitor.com. Fox News disables comments on all YouTube videos about John McCain's death. Fox News on Sunday disabled the ability to comment on its YouTube videos about Senator John McCain's death. Raw Story reports. Comments are disabled for this video, a notice on each video said. This was done in response to vicious comments by far-right commentators. Okay, not fucking lefties showing up and going, I hate that warmongering son of a bitch. Nope. Righties. According to Alternet, some of the comments were appalling in their viciousness. I'm sorry, but I can't celebrate the life of a man who has done so much evil. He is burning in hell right now and receiving the due payment for his evil deeds, one of the comments read. And I'm sure they consider his evil deeds to be, saying, Trump's not really a good guy. Now, YouTube comments already have a bad reputation, but these are apparently even worse than usual. From Haaretz.com. Former Trump aide Roger Stone predicts Donald Trump Jr. soon to be indicted. Former Trump aide Roger Stone predicts Donald Trump Jr. soon to be indicted. Longtime Republican operative and former Trump campaign advisor Roger Stone predicts Special Counsel Robert Mueller will indict Donald Trump Jr. on a quote-unquote process crime. The special counsel is going to charge Donald Trump with lying to the FBI. Notice they're not charging him for having an illegal meeting with a Russian at Trump Tower because there's nothing illegal about that meeting, Stone told James Miller of the Political Insider. Put more precisely, the only thing illegal about that meeting was how the woman got in the country, how she got a visa from the Obama State Department, and why she was meeting with an official from Fusion GPS before and after the Trump Tower meeting. Interesting tactic by Stone in his comments. He's saying that the charges will be a minor matter, though I believe lying to the FBI is still a felony. And he ties in Fusion GPS, the firm behind the dossier, which talked about the infamous piss tape, as well as the Obama administration. Clearly, he's trying to paint the story as that Trump Jr. didn't really do anything wrong, and that the meeting he had with the Russian operative wasn't illegal. I'll just point out that alcoholic shitbag Steve Bannon calls the meeting with the Russians illegal, as do actual legal experts. Roger Stone has also said that he expects to be charged here in the coming days. Standard policy for the FBI, which Mueller was the head of, is to not make any charges that could impact an election 60 days before that election. The midterms are about 70 days from now, so if Mueller is going to be filing charges before the midterm, he's got about 10 days to do it. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to a story which ran about a year ago, but in the wake of what's happened with Manafort and Cohen deserves another look. It's from the Dallas Morning News, and it talks about how the Russians pumped at least $7 million into Republican campaigns during the 2016 campaign. $800,000 of that went to Senator Lindsey Graham's campaign. You'll notice that in recent days, Graham has suddenly gotten soft on Trump. One has to wonder if this has to do with the Russians telling him that he's not going to get any more money if he keeps attacking Trump. The only thing I have to say about all of this is that if you're an American, please make sure that you're registered to vote and you vote for Democrats in the midterms. And another tasty little tidbit here comes from Newsweek.com. Now, Eric Trump is accused of stealing from a cancer charity. It's a tough time to be an heir to a multi-billion-dollar fortune, assuming Trump is actually worth that much. Well, no, it isn't, but Donald Trump Jr. is dominating the news cycle over his admitted collusion with Russia over the 2016 election, and he's not the only Trump kid making life harder for himself than it has to be. Let me just scroll down through here. The other unsavory headline attracting attention to Donald's third born involves the Eric Trump Foundation's annual golf tournament to benefit St. Jude's Research Hospital cancer research. It turns out that the charity event is also put on to financially benefit Eric Trump himself. The feel-good event consists of a one-day golf outing in September at a Trump-owned country club in Westchester, New York. Eric Trump claimed that the charity would be able to use the Trump course free of charge and have the other costs donated. As Forbes reports, that was a lie. Foundation filings reviewed by Forbes show the Trump Organization received more than $1.2 million from the charity for the annual one-day use of the course over the past decade. They also showed that $500,000 of the funds raised at the event over the years was redonated to other charities, not put towards children's cancer research. The Forbes story was enough to prompt the New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman to open an investigation into the allegations of self-dealing by the Eric Trump Foundation. You know, I was worried there for a little bit that Eric wasn't just quite as corrupt as everyone else in the family. And now I'm kind of relieved to find out that he is just as corrupt. Okay, a final note before I get to bed. We recently had the 98th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote in the United States. And one of the few really remarkable things to come out of Tennessee, it was literally one vote by Tennessee Representative Harry T. Byrne that enabled the amendment to pass. As a consequence of his vote, he had to flee for his life. And he did the vote. He made the vote at the behest of his mother, even though he didn't think women should have the right to vote. I will have links to a History Channel article and a Radiolab podcast episode about that in the show notes. And now, I am getting out of here. Sorry the episode is so short, but hey, you got a news episode, an actual real news episode from me. First time in a while. Maybe if they get some people in there, I'll be able to do more of these. There was a story I really wanted to cover, and I just don't have time to find it. But apparently there's been a breakthrough in 3D printing human tissue. That looks really promising. As somebody who's got breathing problems, and, I've been a smoker for 30 years, so who the fuck knows if it's, some kind of infection or, COPD or lung cancer or whatever, which I will get my ass to a doctor as soon as I can, but, working 12 hours a day, it makes it hard to figure all this shit out. I don't know, but it'd be nice if, they could, print me some new lungs. That would be awesome. Okay. I will talk to you later, and remember, you're getting the good stuff this coming weekend. Yeah, it's more Ethiopian Apocrypha. This time, though, it'll be halfway translated into English. That should make for some fun times. At least I hope so.
That's it for this episode of The Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as just about anywhere else podcasts can be found. Many of the episodes are also on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter. @TParkAtheist is the show's Twitter handle. It's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fuzz-Nuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.